want to hear from your thoughts and comments as we conclude with the gifts of grief. I mean, I think some of these hide from grief. The church invites us to face everything as best we can with the gift of Christ, with the gift of love, and with His power. Listen to some of these hymns. What pleasure endures in life without its share of sorrow? What earthly glory can stand firm without change? All things are more fleeting than a shadow, more deceptive than a dream. In a single moment death effaces all, but in the light of your face, O Christ, in the sweetness of your beauty, give rest to the chosen one. As a flower withers and a shadow vanishes, so will every human being be dissolved. At the sound of a trumpet, like a mighty earthquake, all the dead will rise and go forth to meet you. Alas, alas, what agony, listen to this, what agony the soul endures when departing from the body, what tears then, and there is no one to show her pity, the soul. She turns her eyes to the angels, but her plea is in vain. She stretches out her hands to other people, but no one can help her. And so, beloved children, reflecting on the shortness of our life, let us entreat Christ our God to grant rest to the departed and to our souls. All that is human which will not survive death is but vanity. Riches do not endure, nor does glory go with us. For when death arrives, all this vanishes away. Let us cry, therefore, to Christ, our mortal King. Where is the world's attraction? Where is the allurement of passing things? Where is gold and silver? Where is the multitude of people in anxiety? All is dust, all is ashes, all is but a shadow. Come, let us cry out to the immortal King, O Lord. Count worthy of your eternal blessings the one who has departed from us, granting him or her rest in your unending happiness. I want us to listen to these words and take them to heart as we have our final conversation about the gifts of grief. But we've been talking about a lot of these things for the past 2 weeks, but what's one thing that stands out in your mind as you fill this out, as you reflect? Anyone?
I guess the image that I have of my first death experience is just my grandma in the casket, great-grandmother in the casket.
So here's an experience, here's great-grandmother in the casket, the first death experience.
My grandmother, and I don't remember anything of the funeral itself, but I do remember lowering her into the ground.
So something about lowering into the ground,
That physical part.
that physical part of saying goodbye, the actual burying of your grandmother. Anyone else?
I had an experience, and this wasn't that long ago. I put my cat in, and I made the mistake of looking into her eyes after the doctor said she was gone.
So she had the mistake, or maybe the fortune, but she thinks the mistake, but it could be both. But she says the mistake of looking into the cat's eyes before she was put down.
After.
After, I'm sorry.
She was dead.
After she was dead.
She was dead, and that just did something to me.
Yeah, I remember when my mother passed away, that was a very traumatic experience. That was in the early 40s, but...
Early 40s, my mom died. Was that your first death?
No, my father, when I was 11 years old, he passed away.
Anyone else, your first remembrance of any kind of loss that really impacted you?
I was 9, and it was for my grandmother, but the thing I remember is I didn't cry. My cat had died like the day before, and I cried.
So my cat died before I cried, my grandmother died, I didn't cry. Boy, that can set up a really a trippy thing for you, like, who do you love more? And
Yeah.
maybe, you did love your cat more than your grandmother. Who knows, maybe you love your grandmother more, but something about the amount of tears that we shed means how much we love somebody. It's not always true that way. Tears might come later. It doesn't mean the amount of love you have for anyone. So I think that's why I want to have, every year I want to have somehow us talking about death and dying, because I think we don't talk about these things, but sometimes they get planted in our bodies and they kind of ferment in a funny way. Yeah.
I had something similar. My grandma died when I was 8, and I was extremely happy. And I just always thought that was kind of messed up.
So he was extremely happy, so he always thought it was messed up. Did anyone know how messed up you thought you were?
Not till today.
Messed up! Because he was laughing because the mom and dad.
I wasn't laughing.
He was happy.
I can never explain why, I just, to this day, I don't know why.
But see, here's the thing is, like, maybe I'm wondering if somebody said, how are you feeling? What are you noticing? And I'm happy. But I should be sad.
That's exactly what I did too, I covered my mouth.
So I covered him.
Smiling, yeah.
Because I was smiling at the cover of the reality. See what happens as we get younger, and
Yeah.
and for your kids, I pray you can give, like I say, the freedom of speech. So if they're laughing, there's a story behind that.
Yeah.
We're going to play games about that.
Yeah.
But I think what happens in life is we're not able to talk about it, so it gets locked up into our souls, and it's almost like a circuit breaker popping. A good friend of mine that I think I talked, maybe I didn't talk about circuit breakers. So check this out. So her daughter had this tree, jewelry tree, that she had, 6-year-old, 7-year-old daughter. She had a chain, you know how you put the jewelry tree, you had chains and bracelets on. Anyway, when the jewelry fell on the back of an outlet, so it was hanging down, draping down on the outlet of her life. So over time, I'm sure it wiggled, and all of a sudden they went into the room, they turned on the light, all of a sudden, bam, you know, there's lights, and everyone was scared, the kids were crying, and smoke, and flashes, and this person didn't know what to do, and they said they asked somebody, they said, well, go downstairs, you have a circuit breaker. And find out there's one that was probably got tripped, and probably you see it's a little red, turn it to the left, and put it to the right, put it back. She did that, it didn't work, the next day she called the electrician, and the electrician, I guess she didn't do it hard enough, but she reset the circuit breaker. And I never realized this, but I never even thought about a house having a protection device. I never thought of that. A breaker box being a protection of what goes into the house so it can find safety. Then I was thinking about your soul and my soul as a breaker box. That God wired it, just like it wired into that corn, little kernel of corn, just an incredible DNA, incredible way of being. That God created us with an incredible way of protecting ourselves. So what happens is, as kids, when something goes on and we get a big look from an adult, and you know you're laughing, and then all of a sudden you know you're not supposed to be laughing, it's almost like the breaker goes off. And there's no way to connect that energy, that story, that life. And so that goes buried forever and ever and ever. And I'm thinking, I want to be a church that resets breaker boxes, or circuit breakers. We're not created to have circuit breakers that are popped and just disconnected. So, again, so it's funny, I just did this, and he says, yeah, I had my mouth over I mean, who taught him to put his hand over his mouth? It's something against inherent to the human person what we do, right? Like he knew he may be doing something wrong, but he was happy, he doesn't know why. You don't have to know why, but that's a real story, right? We're playing games. So again, how do we in this church offer the real story? Any other places where you went to? Yeah, Karen.
When I was in town, we had a dog at 2 different times, 2 different dogs. And the dogs didn't belong to any particular person, they were just family dogs. But in both cases, they just disappeared one day. And they went to the pound and they were gone. And nobody talked about them, and it was the end. That was the end of that. So I thought about this the other day, and I was thinking, well, that sort of set a way to handle grief and death. You know, they're gone and you go on with your life.
They're gone, and who has that message? They're gone and get on with your life. And God forbid if you talk about a mother, father, grandparent after their death because, oh, it's going to be too painful. Oh, don't do that. Oh, just think they're going to start crying. And we don't know what to do with the tears. Right? So, yeah, so say it again. What did you say? They're gone and they're what?
They're gone and you get on with your life.
Who else? Yes. Start chatting it.
It's not mine, but a couple of weeks ago you asked us to have a conversation around the dinner table, kind of, and my wife was able to take our youngest daughter and ask her about the first time she remembers loss, and we didn't know what she was going to say. But what was interesting is we forgot, or I had forgotten about this, but when she was very young, she took my son's hamster out of his cage to play with it. and she just thought it was so cool and so neat, she actually squished it to death.
Oh,
And so her first experience with loss and with death was at her own hands. And I've never known this. I've never known that she still remembers this.
wow.
I didn't remember how this would affect her. You know, how this is now a part of her story, that the first time she remembers
Yeah.
death is at her own hands with this, you know, creature, this pet that she took from her brother. You know, because he was really upset that this.
So what kind of circuit breaker can go off with Carissa?
I don't know, but it's caused us to start looking for something to reset. It's starting to explain a whole lot.
That hamster.
No, I mean, she doesn't go around killing animals. I'm just, but yeah, I think it makes her always want to, she's always trying to please people now, always trying to make them happy, like, because she doesn't want to cause that sadness or something, because it happened to her own hand. It wasn't something that happened to her, she did it. So that's kind of been her power of how, that's how I don't know, but
So let me ask,
I don't know.
all right, hold on, Steve, hold on.
now spending lots of
So let me ask that idea, so what's the gift of grief? Of bringing back, inviting that story? What's the gift that can, anyone? What gift can come out of, honey, when was the first time you remember a loss, and then she tells you the story, like, really horrible story that she has to remember. What's the gift of that?
You can bear one another's burdens, you can walk with them through life because you've been there. And that's biblical, you know.
But the Bible tells us so. That's the gift, because we get to love in that hard time, not just when things are fun. But we can't be there when they bury
I
us.
think for my daughter, it was forgiveness.
Oh my gosh.
It was forgiveness.
Yes.
You're not a bad person, and that you can be forgiven for an accident. It was a mistake, and you know that it's forgivable. You can be forgiven, and to get that guilt out of it, because carrying that around will affect, you know, everything that you do. And I've heard it described like when a part of us gets broken, we go to the doctor to put a cast on. But too many times spiritually, whatever that cast is that we put on our wounds, we identify with it. And we can't run as fast as we should. We can't lift as heavy as we should. We can't do the things that we should because we're afraid to take the cast without realizing it's healed underneath. But we've so identified with this cast, whatever it is. And she may have been carrying this cast around, and hopefully I can help her cut the cast off and say, you're healed. And now you can run. Now you can live. Now, I think spiritually we're so immobilized by the cast we put on our wounds.
I like that.
And we're so bound, I run the last part. We're so bound up by that stuff that we don't. And hopefully we can help her take whatever
Beautiful.
cast she's put on her soul, with the, offering the forgiveness and talking through it, that hopefully now she can see herself as she truly is. It can help her run and do what she needs to do.
Right.
Yeah, last Sunday you made me think of something that was for loss, and I kept going back as far as I could on the first loss. And it wasn't really my grandfather. I went way back. It was the goldfish. So one morning, we came downstairs, and there's a goldfish floating in the fishbowl.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, well, the part of that, when I finally went looking for the first one, I only thought of that because of one of the statements. It's weird, it's linked to something else, but, so we went downstairs, my brother and I, the fish is floating at the top of the fishbowl, and what I remember was my mom going, well, we're gonna have to give him a funeral. And I'm like, what? So, that fish came to our house in a bag full of water. And he left our house in water too. The toilet. So I remember thinking, wait a minute. So that day, the fish were like, wow. So my dad puts the fish in the toilet. And I'm like, well, what are we doing? And see you later, Ralph. Goodbye. And I remember thinking, I wasn't having some moment which was weird because I was like, oh wow. So if you're dead, you get flushed. But I wasn't thinking that at the time, but that's what happened. So I was thinking about that, and let me give you the link here. The link was, for me, I saw a dead fish. Like, the link was, that fish was swimming around yesterday, and today it's not. And we gotta do something. Well, what really set that off was, a couple of years ago in Singapore, one of the sailors on our ship died. And one of the things that happened was, I was at the Singapore General Hospital, and so this is the link to the fish. The sailor was in the emergency room. He dies. So myself and 10 other sailors are there, and they're saying, we want to see him. And the link was, anybody in the medical profession, a funeral is a prepared event. Someone dead an hour ago is not.
Yeah.
And so for me, this is what brought, that's what brought the fish. I'm like, wow, this fish was alive, now it's dead. This sailor was alive 4 hours ago when we came to this city, and he's not now. And I'm talking about, the stuff is still in him, the tubes and all the things that you do to keep somebody alive. So this is what they wanted to see. Well, by instruction, and this is what you're talking about, Father, it really blew me away last Sunday. By instruction, I'm explaining to these crying sailors, no, actually, I'm not supposed to allow you to see this sailor in this state.
No.
With all the stuff. If I can avoid that, I want to. And I remember calling the ship going, hey, these guys are flipping out. And they were like, hey man, and I'm like, look. So ultimately the story ends with, I said, look, I told the chief, I said, hey, you need to get you and 2 other sailors in here to confirm the death of this 22-year-old before we do this. And so it's all about seeing the reality of it.
No.
I don't have a distance, at least not in the profession I am leaving. I didn't have a distance between, a memorial service and a funeral is one thing, the death of the person is another. And there's a space between the two. And you know what I mean? Do you follow what I'm saying there? And it's weird, it all brought me to the fish that was floating the next morning because he was alive the day before. So hopefully that helps. I don't know, that was my experience.
Yeah, I think you have right kind of on the head with the way a lot of people deal with it is everybody has their own different reality. Like your dog story, the dog just disappears, right? That's the death to them. I made what I believe now, in hindsight, to be the poor choice of when I brought my dog of 14 years. I got it when both my kids were babies, and brought them in and had them experience the whole process that they wanted to do. So, which was a totally different story of their loss of the dog, because the reality was the actual medical veterinarian reality of that dog being killed, for euthanized because he was so sick. So they fit that different realities of what death is, and everybody, I think, when they grieve, they personalize what death is, right? When they see that unprepared body or unprepared situation, it's personalized, and they have to deal with it. That's why I think faith is so huge in death, is that we have that answer of what's going to happen, however horrific that death is to the animal or to the person. So everyone's kind of personalized. It seems to me when I've been around it, is ultimately it kind of goes back to their own.
So why is it hard to have conversations about such an important thing?
Because you don't want to dig up old wounds.
Yeah.
Why?
You have to see yourself.
I've asked that question the first time I asked it from a different place. Why? It's not the first time we experienced pain. But yeah.
We spent a lot of money, I think, masking that, the funeral, the whatever. I mean, it's kind of.
But even that, why is it hard to bring up a conversation of people that we lost or even people we love?
People fear death.
But what's hard about talking? I know it's fear, but why is it hard to talk now in the skin, in the flesh, when our hearts are beating? Okay? Anyone? Help me out with that. Paul?
I will answer that question in a roundabout way. I think because we don't focus on the fact that they are gone, we always say gone, lost, we kind of push it in the back of our mind, but we forget that it's our choice if we want to keep a relationship with them, and we don't talk about that. Because when we talk about somebody's gone, they're gone. But it's a different relationship. It reminds me, you know, like if you talk to somebody, your parents in grief, you don't see them, but you have a relationship with them. And you know, some of them die, and you don't get to see them before, you know, for a year or two. And then it's my choice to decide to leave and say they're gone, or say, wait a second, they're still alive. Spiritually, I believe that. I mean, as a church, we believe that too. So we make a conscious choice to not have an ongoing relationship with them. And I think our church, in her wisdom, had the memorial service. It's not to remember them, but to say, you know, we pray for them, they pray for us. So I think that that's why it's a painful place to go to.
I just had a crazy thought. I want to have a circuit breaker pops, because the people on the other side are so scared. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I really think, I think I thought about this before, but it became clear to me. I think what happens is kids are so wired in a beautiful way, kids can talk about anything if they're given a fertile ground. So I'm wondering if their circuit breaker pops because they see mom and dad, adults, whatever, freaking out, trying to protect us, so there's no room to talk about experience. So it goes off, and then we never talk. Karen and Martin.
When our daughter, when my grandmother died, I went to the funeral and I took our young daughter, who was, I don't remember how old she was, Kristen. I don't think she was in school yet. And after that, for several years, whenever anything happened to her that made her sad or hurt, or she fell down, or she bumped herself, she would cry in the most, I mean, just cry, and finally she would say, I'm thinking of my grandmother who died.
Wow.
You know, so she was re-experiencing that death over and over and over and over again for like 4 or 5 years before she was.
That's powerful.
Can I, oh, go ahead, sorry. Please.
Marty, then.
Can I offer this idea, because I think that's a pivotal question. There's one is children, in my view, children cannot see mortality that we can. I think the innocence of childhood is, there's no way they're thinking about mortality until the fish or the dog or the hamster or whatever. It's not present. In other words, a child state, I believe, is a state of innocence that doesn't include, mortality has to be taught. Mortality has to be seen. Because I think a child early on, eventually a pet's gonna die, or we're gonna go buy some roadkill, a squirrel or a bird. Something's gonna happen, or a bug. There's a spider in the house, smash, a fly. I don't know what else, but sooner or later, this thing about death and mortality usually starts with bugs and animals and whatever else. I don't know that that's present in a child, but that's my first thing. I think to go where Paul is, for me, I can speak for me. If you're older, you know, as my dad would say, hey, everybody wants to take out religion insurance after age 50. he's like, look, my dad has nothing to do with religion, he never did. But after 50, he did. So everybody wants to take out insurance on the fact that we are mortal. And faith says we're not. Faith says we're not mortal. But we fight that because, and this is what I believe we fight that because, and I've said this to sailors and Marines, none of us were there when Jesus came out of the tomb. So we believe, you bet we believe, and we pray, and we have eternal life, and we have all of that. But none of us were there. It's a story passed to us. Now, I believe we're going to live again, but I wasn't there. That's the mortality part of it. The mortality is real.
I just was going to say, I think you're right about parents sort of started playing the organ, and I started playing for funerals. I went to this one of my first funerals, they brought in this little tiny white casket, and I cried through the whole funeral, because the church were sitting right in front of me, bawling, and I couldn't help it. And I went home, and my parents said, honey, you shouldn't pray for funerals. And it's that flipping of that spirit breaker. There was nothing wrong with me being.
But what would have been another response to Valerie? Honey, let me, what did I say, Valerie?
What was the response here?
The mom said, honey, maybe it's too hard for you. Maybe you shouldn't be playing for funerals. They're too hard. What might be another response? I'll get back to you, Jennifer. What would be a response to this kid, 16, 17?
What made it so hard?
What made it so hard was another response.
It's normally sad.
It's normally said, I'm sorry, let's talk about it, we get a Coke, ice cream. I want to hear what you saw, what you feel. There's a story there. So what happens, the story doesn't have any verbal language. It just stays in the body.
Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about children, because Thursday, we went to a funeral for a friend of ours. The husband died at age 45. He had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And as the family came in and the coffin was there, the children, the little 4-year-old said, "Is that where my daddy is?" And they kept saying, "Is that where my daddy is? Is that where my daddy is?" And I was in the back, so I didn't really see the on the side, I didn't see the response. But watching the children, they were sad, but they weren't, everybody in the chapel was really sad. But they had drawn pictures of their dad. They drew a picture the daughter had drawn a picture of him tickling her to put in the coffin because that's what she wanted him to come back to do. And when, and they kind of ran around the service in and out. And when it came time to go to the gravesite and they lowered the coffin, all the children really wanted to do was look inside. They wanted to look and watch it happen. And the the grandparents kept pulling the children away. No, it was too close. They were too, and so I thought that was,
One more, I want to respect the time, one more thought.
So, actually, I have something. So, you were talking earlier about sort of children not having a notion of mortality. So, we bought 3 fish about, a month ago? And they slowly, over the course of the past month, have all died.
Because they overfed them. They can't feed them 3 times a day.
We apparently have no idea how to take care of fish. So it was very interesting to see the kids' reaction to the 3. The first one, they were really upset. The second one, it was like, eh. But then, like an hour later, they were upset. And the third one, Stella, our oldest, had basically no reaction to. But Jake, ever since the 3 have died, has been really, nervous. He's been sucking on his fingers and all kinds of interesting stuff. And so, I think it was about a week ago, he was in the car with my wife, and he said, "Mommy, you and Daddy and Phoebe and Stella and I, we're never going to die, right?" And so anyways, ever since the fish, apparently that's what's been sort of making him horribly nervous and all this kind of stuff. So it's really started a lot of interesting discussions we weren't really thinking we were going to have with the 4-year-old.
But look how, you can just cut that conversation.
Yeah.
Or bring it once in a while back into the dinner table.
Yeah.
And have them have a voice and hopefully to offer some response to him with their love. I I want to thank you for journeying the past 3 weeks together. For me, this is a sacred part of life, is to look in the face of death and not to run away from it. And I mean death, any kind of death, whether it's divorce, a loss of a job, a loss of innocence, people that are raped when they're younger. That's a loss of innocence, and sometimes it gets cut off. And we can't talk about it. The circuit breaker gets cut off. So our church is about reconnecting circuit breakers so our body can be full of life, so we can walk like this, not like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Oh. Because, frankly, this fear dictates us. We go back to the garden. Everything goes back to the garden. And I want you to help me. Oh, yeah, I want you to help me teach that. It goes back to the garden. Because in the garden, God created everything in a beautiful way, because of whatever the apple, whatever the evil one is, this is disrupted that. Until we face the facts that it's our job to respond to the disruption with our true nature, like the kernel of the corn, our true nature, to respond to fear, to respond to anxiety, to respond to judgment, all that with love, because we're not going to be overtaken by that. And we're not going to be overtaken by that when we create a fertile ground to have conversations, so we can know in our hearts what's true. So I thank you for your love. I thank you for sitting and talking about sacred things. We can sit here for the whole rest of the year talking about the beauty of life. We're not talking about death. When we talk about death, we're not talking about death. We're talking about life. I tell you, every funeral, it's all about life. And we got to live that way as best we can, to the best of our abilities. So thank you so much. Next week we're going to have the charrette, the town hall meeting for the next 2 weeks. Thank you, Jennifer, for helping make that happen. Sorry we didn't have time for everyone to have their voice, but thank you for those that did contribute. Let's all stand. There's a really beautiful, it's almost like a lullaby. Maybe my wife can help us sing this. Among the saints, give rest, O Christ, to the soul of your servants. Sorry. Blessed is the way you walk today, for a place of rest is prepared for you. She'll sing it once. Let's sing it together. Okay?
Blessed is the way you walk today, for a place of rest is prepared for you. Blessed is the way you walk today, for a place of rest is prepared for you.
One more time.
Blessed is the way you walk today, for a place of rest is prepared for you.
We thank you for everything you prepare for our lives, that you continue to prepare for us, that we walk into your kingdom with boldness, with humility, with a true love for you. May you guide us, Lord, to talk about the difficult with your power and your resolve and your boldness, that you, Lord, will not abandon us. You, Lord, will help us respond to any tragedy in life with your power. This we ask in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you so much. Take these home, keep them, have conversations with people. The easiest one to have is your first loss of a